Hello, I'm Carol Swain, and I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Conversations with Dr. Carol Swain. This is a show where we talk about faith, family, politics, unity, and whatever else is on my mind. And today we will be talking about homeschoolers, homeschooling parents. Many of us are dismayed about the direction of education in America. We look at our public, private schools, and even Christian academies, and we are shocked and horrified at times by the education our children are getting from their teachers. And we find radical theories like critical race theory, critical gender theory, all of these things seeping into the education of our children. More and more of our children are being pulled away by secular humanism. And so parents that really want to take charge of what information their children are receiving are homeschooling. There's been a homeschooling revolution, especially since the pandemic, when more parents were exposed to the curriculum their children were learning by just overhearing some of the online teaching seminars. And so we have parents that are pondering homeschooling. Maybe they thought it was something they couldn't do. Joining me today to tell us about homeschooling is Leigh Bortins. Leigh is the founder of Classical Conversations, and it is the leading home education program and resource in the nation and maybe even internationally. Leigh can tell us more about it, but help me to welcome Leigh Bortins to Conversations.
Thank you, Carol. That was so nice of you to have me here.
Well, Leigh, first tell our viewers what got you started with homeschooling.
It's been a long time. My children are all grown. And so what started us with homeschooling was my husband, who's quite a bit older than I am. And I had multiple academic college degrees, and we were pretty discouraged at the state of education back in the 80s. He also went through college in the 70s. And we started having our children. My husband was like, what are we going to do? Because they're not going to the school system we came from. And the Lord was just good. We weren't even Christians at that point, but I stumbled on the idea of homeschooling and went home and told my husband about it. And he was like, thank goodness. This is what we're going to do. And so with little babies in hand, I began to look at what do you do to homeschool, just like so many parents today are doing.
Well, Leigh, back when you started, homeschoolers were considered weird, that children were considered weird. What were the reactions of family, friends, and neighbors when you announced that you would be educating your children at home?
Well, we can remember that our parents were not very happy with us, and they thought we would change our minds by the time they were no longer preschoolers. But what's really wonderful is that by the time my children were older and my siblings started having children, all my parents' grandkids were homeschooled, and they really changed their tune when they saw the result of how our children were. The one thing you hear all the time about homeschool kids from grandparents is, they look you in the eye and they would talk to you with respect, and that's what my parents were seeing, and so their attitude changed.
Do you know what I really like about them?
What?
The ones that I've met, when I meet the children, they have these little side businesses going on, and not only are they well educated, they have read the Constitution, they understand education by reading original documents. And maybe I'm being exposed to the most elite of the elite, but the homeschoolers that I've met, the children can do things that are very responsible. I mean, they are contributing members of their families. Some of them, if they're on a farm, they have their own egg business, or maybe they're an artist, or maybe they can sew, but they can do things.
Right, because, they're not hanging out with peers and other children all the time. Right, all of our children have friends. We're glad that they have friends. But we're raising children to be sons and daughters of our Lord and Savior. We're raising them to become adults. And when children hang out with adults who take interest in them, the children start to take interest in the things the adults are doing. And so they naturally start to pay attention to just how does economy work? How does food for service at home work? Shopping, car repair, those kind of things. And so it's a very holistic kind of education. It's not bringing school home. It's just acting as a family. What I say to people is homeschoolers don't do school like it's not something you do to your children, it's something you do with your children, and that inculcates a lot of responsibility.
The other thing I've noticed about homeschool is because I was a university professor for 28 years, is that often the homeschooled children were above in achievement those that have been educated at private schools and public schools, that they were just strong students. And yes, they went to elite colleges. I taught at Princeton and Vanderbilt, and I encountered homeschool kids at both of those places.
So I would like to even hear more stories and feedback from you on that. So we hear that all the time from universities. In fact, a lot of universities have scholarships just for homeschoolers now because the professors want those students. And I think the key thing among them across the board is that as you homeschool your children, they become older, they take more and more responsibility for their own academics. And so when they go to college, it's not odd to them to now be in charge of all their academics, which of course for some children, excuse me, they've always done what their teachers told them to do, which is a good thing in itself. But then they're released at the university and they've never had to think for themselves, organize their schedule, strategize on what's the best way to approach material. And so homeschoolers have to do that all the time because their parents expect them to take responsibility for their academics.
And one of the things too that I believe makes them better students is that, education at its best, it's a marketplace of ideas. And so you have to be exposed to more than one side. And some of the stereotypes about homeschool kids may be that they're one-dimensional, but that is not my experience. The ones that I have met have been well-rounded. And so whatever has taken place, since it was seen as strange, I think homeschooling is the way to go. And I do know that there have been legislative attacks on homeschooling parents, and we will get into that during our next segment. But right now we will take a break, and I want you to hold your thought. Okay. We will be right back after this message from our sponsor.
Conversations with Dr. Carol Swain is made possible by Cooper Steel, a family-owned business that provides the steel fabrications for some of the greatest buildings across the United States. 60 years ago, Kenneth and Faye Cooper founded their company in Shelbyville, Tennessee.
Cooper Steel believes in sponsoring Carol Swain because we believe as she does, you build strong, you stand strong.
What started as a vision and now a nationally recognized and operated company that remains true to its founders' Judeo-Christian values and principles, Cooper Steel is committed to excellence, responsibility, and community. Cooper Steel's motto is, build strong, stand strong. They treat their employees and customers like family. Thank you to Cooper Steel for standing strong with Conversations with Dr. Carol Swain. Learn more about our generous sponsor at coopersteel.com. Demands for political correctness and mandatory race and gender diversity training have placed onerous burdens on businesses, churches, and nonprofits. Learn how to improve relations by educating your team with principle-based training that brings people together rather than driving wedges between them. Unity Training Solutions helps your organization build strong teams by respecting and harnessing individual talent, achieving your goals by providing viable alternatives to the divisive and counterproductive critical race and gender theories is our mission. Our expert facilitators and consultants bring greater harmony to workplaces and educational institutions by respecting everyone's civil rights and equality under the law. We encourage Americans to rediscover and re-embrace our national motto, E pluribus unum, out of many, one. A few of our core values and principles include no hidden agendas, respecting the differences of others. Our citizens share more similarities than differences, and trusting in the traditional principles of hard work, integrity, and accountability. Our seminars are geared towards your organization, educational, business, corporate, as well as churches and nonprofits. Want to know more about how to strengthen your team? Knowledge is power. You can learn more about Unity Training Solutions at unitytrainingsolutions.com.
Welcome back. I'm with my guest, Leigh Bortins, and we're talking about homeschooling. Leigh is the founder of Classical Conversations. And Leigh, what advice would you give parents tell us, what is homeschooling? Because we think we know and maybe we don't know.
That's a really great question. So the one thing I caution parents on is thinking it's the same as bringing school home. We're trying to kind of escape the worst of things that make school institutional and have our children be able to just really study and learn the way that they need to learn. And so a lot of parents, here's an example. I had a grandfather tell me he wished his daughter would homeschool, but he couldn't figure out how she would do it because she had 4 children and they would need 6 hours a day per child. And how could she possibly teach for 24 hours a day? And, I looked at him, I said, nobody does that. What we do is we work with all our children for a couple of hours a day, and then the older children may go off on their own for a couple more hours a day. So first, I just want to break up that idea that it's bringing school home. It absolutely is not. It's living as a family. Let me explain more about that. So if you think about it, depending on the age of your children and depending on your own abilities, you're going to be learning right along with them. And so a lot of homeschoolers or people who are scared of homeschooling think they need to know everything. Well, the Lord's good. You just need to know it 1 second ahead of the children that you're raising, right?
Right.
And so you don't do all of it. You don't bring school home, and you're always constantly assessing what's the best thing to do with my family today. Of course, part of it's about strong academics.
Right.
But strong academics don't take a whole day. It's like milking the cow. A little bit a day for 12 years will make it so your children really do know how to learn.
And what I really like about it is every mother or every parent knows that each child has a different personality. Mm-hmm. They may have a different learning style. If you are the person that's putting together the plan, which when I say putting together the plan, it doesn't, I guess, mean you're doing a lesson plan every day, but you know where your child is and what they need. And so they really do get the individualized attention for their pace.
Right. And so, the average child needs about 30 minutes a day to do well with rigorous academics. And so if you have
what kind of
about 30 minutes a day for rigorous academics, that's it. So that might mean
you don't force them to sit there 2 hours.
No, especially when they're little, maybe
right.
Now and then a middle schooler, you might go, yes.
For a high school student, you sit there 2 hours.
Right. You're going to do that. And so it's just really getting to know your children. You know what it is, Carol? It's back to being learning how to parent. And so, if somebody else is always the expert organizing our child's lives for us, we don't get to practice parenting them well. And we're the ones that the Lord's given those children to. And so homeschooling is really part of our own sanctification and learning how to live as a family together. And to me, that's the biggest joy and benefit of homeschooling. Somebody asked me now that my children are gone, what do I miss about homeschooling? Because our 4 sons are all grown up. And it's the comedy show, spending all day long wondering what those kids are going to do next and how enjoyable it's going to be and what I'm going to learn from them as well as what they learn from me.
It really deepens the relationship between the parent and the child and the grandparents. And one of the things that really bothers me today is so much disrespect that comes from young people that they've been to school and they have all these progressive ideas and they will call their parents sometimes, you're racist, you're homophobic, you're xenophobic. They learn these terms and they throw it at their parents and somehow they think they are in charge, that they know everything. And homeschooling is a way that the authority lines between parent and child, those remain in place. But, in the best circumstance, you should be able to discuss any topic with your child. And if you don't know the answers, you can always expose them to other thinkers. And they need to have divergent views. And I believe that's something that Classical Conversations encourages.
Yeah, so we're really big into original source documents. And you had mentioned before the break about how, as a professor, the children that were homeschooled were well-rounded. And I think it's because they've had hundreds of teachers. Every single book they read is another teacher's voice that they're listening to and pulling into their, and really into their soul. And as a homeschooling parent, one of the things you try to help them do in the early years is what we call a lot of grammar, a lot of memory work, a lot of just building copious vocabulary, so that when they go and read other people's ideas, one, they can read those books because they've got such a great vocabulary. But two, they got a place in their head where they can actually say, oh, like, Napoleon, he's the War of 1812. That means he's after the Revolution of 1776. And so they have, timelines memorized and maps and geography and all those basic things that all American children grew up learning over 100 years ago. We do the same thing when they're young, so that when they read then these pretty difficult books, they have a place in their storage bank to put those ideas. And that's why they're such good organized thinkers when they get you.
And it's also great for the parents because it engages them in materials that maybe if they were educated at a public school, that they were not exposed to the kind of education that their children are receiving.
That's absolutely true, because I know that's one of the things that helped me start classical conversations was when I was reading the Constitution with our middle schoolers and I was saying, this is hard. I'm not quite sure what this says. And so, I just stuck with it with them, and together we learned how to read it. And that, of course, led, to more Shakespeare or to Virgil and to Homer. And it just kept building our vocabulary and our ability to be, just to access more and more difficult works that are important works.
And then the other thing that I think that people who are intimidated may not realize, or there's such a strong homeschooling network that you're really not alone. And then some of the young people I know will do sports in the public schools. Mm-hmm. They're not totally isolated where they are not participating, in music or some of the things that the public schools might offer mm-hmm. that are not so dangerous.
Yeah, and what most people don't know is you don't need the public schools to offer that. Homeschoolers have put together every kind of organization you can imagine. I actually started the North Carolina Homeschool Athletic Association 25 years ago, so my kids could play whatever sport they wanted to play. And if you're a parent with a mission, you can do anything anybody else can do too. So they're not alone, whether it's sports or drama clubs. We have homeschool bands. We have all kinds of activities that you can participate in. And of course, classical conversations.
Well, Leigh, that is so encouraging. And I want to hear more about classical conversations for those parents that are wondering, what did you start some years ago? We're going to take another break, okay. And when we return, more with Leigh, and we're going to talk about classical conversations. It's a great program that you will want to know more about.
Cooper Steel is a family-owned business that provides the steel fabrications for some of the greatest buildings across the United States. 60 years ago, Kenneth and Faye Cooper founded their company in Shelbyville, Tennessee. What started as a vision and now a nationally recognized and operated company that remains true to its founders' Judeo-Christian values and principles. Cooper Steel's motto is, build strong, stand strong. Thank you to Cooper Steel for standing strong with Conversations with Dr. Carol Swain.
For those of you who would like to know what exactly our children are facing in their education system, this is a must-read book. It will equip you and prepare you to make decisions about your child's health, about your child's education. So I want to encourage every one of you to grab a copy of Dr. Swain's book and join with me and Carol on the front lines in this critical time to eradicate the liberal abduction of our children.
Welcome back to Conversations. We're having this great conversation about homeschooling. Leigh, tell us about classical conversations. You started it some years ago. How did you go from being the mother that was trying to figure out how you were going to do it to starting this program? I know that it's a nationally recognized homeschooling program, one of the top ones. Is it also internationally used?
Yes, so we're in 40 countries right now, plus countries.
40 countries?
Yeah, we're all over the world and have been for a while now. And I started it out of I love my children, and I needed to have more accountability for myself as well as them if we were going to study the classics and look at these original source documents. And so as fun as it is for our family to maybe put on a Shakespeare play together, my kids needed to do that with other people too that were their own age. And so we meet once a week as a family. We have up to 12 students in a challenge program, and then you might have 8 students in a foundations program, which is for our younger children. The parents participate as well as all the children in the family. And we just get together as a community. We mostly meet at churches, but we'll meet wherever we can find a location. And for 24 to 30 weeks a year, we get together that once a week and kind of have a really just great PTA meeting together where the parents can say, I'm no good at this, help me here, or I'm really good at this, let me help you. My child liked doing it this way. Here's a great field trip we're going to take together. And we just make sure that once a week we complete assignments at home, bring them together and say, okay, how can we improve on that? So we need families to join us who are really competent homeschoolers and who can help lead, direct, and tutor programs, as well as we love families that feel like they're struggling and need to homeschool with a friend. And oftentimes that friend is for the parent, not so much the child. And so it is a tuition-based program because our leaders are highly trained, as well as they commit to those 30 weeks. They don't stop and go. They have a curriculum they're studying so that they can be most effective in helping you as a parent homeschool your children classically.
Well, okay, would you describe the tuition as affordable for families?
I think so. For a child under 12 years old, it's $500 for the whole year.
You're kidding.
No, now I got to have a little bit of a caveat there. We do have some areas like California is really strangling us.
Well, we know about California.
Yeah, so it's more expensive there. And then our high school program's about $1,500 a year.
My goodness, that is so reasonable.
Yeah, it is. And the reason why is because the people who are running these programs are homeschooling their own children at the same time. And they want to be there with their kids. But the Bible tells us the workman's worth his weight.
Right.
And so we want to make sure everybody's contributing somehow financially so that we keep going.
It shows commitment when you have some skin in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Your children are skin in the game, but other skin. Are you involved also with other homeschoolers? Like, do you participate in the conferences? I know in Nashville, there's usually an annual homeschooling conference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we go to every single conference we can find out about. And then, a lot of our resources that we recommend to people are written and developed by other homeschoolers. And so we have vendor partners as well as like conferences in a lot of ways are training partners. There's people there speaking and explaining to thousands, literally like in the Nashville one, they might have 6,000, 7,000 people show up. And so they have to have a lot of speakers to encourage those folks. So you can get everything about how do you start your own sports organization to how do you read Homer. There's all kinds of instruction going on, and we like participating in that.
And do you have any advice for people that may be watching and they would like to contribute to either curriculum or, maybe they have a teaching background. Mm-hmm. They're fed up with public schools. Mm-hmm. They are fed up with their private schools, and they have suddenly learned that their Christian academy ain't so Christian. How can these people tap in? Maybe they don't have children. Can they tap in?
Yeah, so yes and no. We are about supporting the homeschooling parents. So they always have the priority when it comes to training, positions, directing programs. We like these other folks, though, to be involved in the sense of recommending curriculum, helping us we have these things called summer practicums where we need help training during that time. We don't bring in professionals. What we're trying to say is a master teacher is somebody who can teach anything.
Right.
And every homeschooler has to learn how to do that. So we hire our moms and dads trying to learn how to teach classically.
And then another thing that I've been concerned about is that some states, the state wants more and more control over families. Mm-hmm. And our children in particular. You may have heard the PBS lawyer that said that Trump supporters, that children should be taken away from them and re-educated.
I didn't hear that, but I'm not surprised.
So, tell us a little bit, and we don't have a lot of time, about the legal situation. Mm-hmm. Are homeschooling parents under attack?
In some states more so than others. Fortunately, homeschooling is a state-by-state issue. So if your state's not friendly, you could move. Thanks to HSLDA, the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, they have worked really hard to keep homeschooling free in every state. But the oppression that's kind of arising at this point is kind of undermining things, saying that, the churches might have property tax issues if they work with homeschoolers, or if you have any kind of business and there's any kind of hiring going on in your homeschool business, you might have to hire some of this critical theory kind of people.
Oh, my goodness.
And
I have a solution for that.
Yeah, what's that solution?
No, my Unity training solutions would be an alternative.
Mm-hmm.
But there are other people that have alternatives too.
Right. But in general, just so you know, we aren't under attack. You know what? That much. What I think mostly is happening is they're so distracted by COVID in the public schools. They don't have a lot of time right now to give us trouble. We've had more trouble in the past than we really have had this year with them trying to undermine us.
Well, Leigh, I really applaud what you're doing and what you've done and just how you've been a shining example. And I hope that our viewers will check out Classical Conversations, and if they're thinking about homeschooling, that they will actually do it. So thank you for being a guest on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
And we're going to take a break, and when I return, I will have some closing thoughts. Stick with us.
Cooper Steel is a family-owned business that provides the steel fabrications for some of the greatest buildings across the United States. 60 years ago, Kenneth and Faye Cooper founded their company in Shelbyville, Tennessee. What started as a vision and now a nationally recognized and operated company that remains true to its founders' Judeo-Christian values and principles. Cooper Steel's motto is, "Build strong, stand strong." Thank you to Cooper Steel for standing strong with Conversations with Dr. Carol Swain. Demands for political correctness and mandatory race and gender diversity training have placed onerous burdens on businesses, churches, and nonprofits. Learn how to improve relations by educating your team with principle-based training that brings people together rather than driving wedges between them. Unity Training Solutions helps your organization build strong teams by respecting and harnessing individual talent. Achieving your goals by providing viable alternatives to the divisive and counterproductive critical race and gender theories is our mission. Our expert facilitators and consultants bring greater harmony to workplaces and educational institutions by respecting everyone's civil rights and equality under the law. We encourage Americans to rediscover and re-embrace our national motto, E pluribus unum, out of many, one. A few of our core values and principles include no hidden agendas, respecting the differences of others. Our citizens share more similarities than differences, and trusting in the traditional principles of hard work, integrity, and accountability. Our seminars are geared towards your organization, educational, business, corporate, as well as churches and nonprofits. Want to know more about how to strengthen your team? Knowledge is power. You can learn more about Unity Training Solutions at unitytrainingsolutions.com.
For those of you who would like to know what exactly our children are facing in their education system, this is a must-read book. It will equip you and prepare you to make decisions about your child's health, about your child's education. So I want to encourage every one of you to grab a copy of Dr. Swain's book and join with me and Carol on the front lines in this critical time to eradicate the liberal abduction of our children.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Conversations. I'd like to thank our guest, Leigh Bortins of Classical Conversations, for her story as well as the information about her program. And I would encourage you all to go to her website, check out the information. And if you have wondered about homeschooling, hopefully this show will encourage you to move to the next stage. You can do it, and it's something that is critically important for our children. We have to be in control of their education. And you as the parent, you have an opportunity to do this for your child, but also for our nation. Thank you for joining us today, and tune in next week for another episode of Conversations.